Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 15. Insertion into the Hex Argus Industrial Suite on Saturday went easily enough, and that was good, because I found myself rather edgy. The skeleton and I replayed our little conversation every time I laid myself down to sleep. That had me second-guessing myself and wondering if I was doing certain things certain ways, because that's how Rex does them, or how the skeleton used to do them. The team was brought into Hex Argus under the guise of being individuals who were looking to defect from their corporations and join Hex Argus. Security for that sort of thing demanded they come in on Saturday, when most folks only worked half a day anyway. That minimized the chance of their being recognized and, for us, reduced the chance of innocent bystanders being caught in any firefights. The Whiz Kid and Mr. Beach took up positions in the tech center at Hex Argus. And in jig time, the kid had patched his equipment into the above-ground security network. He didn't push down into the lower-level security, because we didn't want any slips to alert the people on level 5 that we were working in operation. While such caution might have seemed foolish in the face of possible support troops hidden down there, our primary concern was in establishing surprise. We did this very simply. With the kid in place earlier on, he tapped the security video feeds running down to the command center. While our personnel were in the building legitimately, he was able to isolate and animate images of them leaving the building by morphing together their images with other people's departures. As the majority of folks in the building started to leave, we sent a video record of our own people going out. The kid doctored the monitors within Hex Argus, including the surveillance devices Imperial had secreted in the suite. And by 7 in the evening, the folks in the security center down on 5 had every indication that Hex Argus was empty. We prepared to go in at 1 in the morning. In addition to our own personal selection of a sidearm, I went with a Punisher just because I liked it more than the aggressor I'd used in the bar. Everyone carried a CAW-2000 submachine gun. The advantages of carrying a lighter weapon like that came in that we would be fighting in an enclosed area. The compact CAW-2K wouldn't get hung up on door frames and still kicked out a lot of ordnance when needed. The two exceptions to the above were Ash and Klaus. We gave Ash an AR-3000 assault rifle. He was big enough that the AR-3K was to him what a CAW-2K was to the rest of us. In addition, the built-in grenade launcher provided us some seriously heavy firepower if things really started to go bad. The fact that Ash would take a lot of damage before going down meant we'd have heavy weapons backup on demand, and that may well be the difference between life and death. Klaus is contrary by nature, so I suggested he carry an SAG-SG 7200I combat shotgun. He complained, as I expected, about the fact that it was only semi-automatic, but he did like the fact that the gun was all but jam-proof. He also liked the fact that I was willing to let him mix loads of slugs and buckshot in any configuration he saw fit to use. I figured the shotgun would be less useful on security folk and heretics than it would be on any Dark Legion creatures. And if we had to leave Klaus guarding our butts as we ran from some monster, well, it would give him something to complain about. The most difficult choice we had to make came concerning body armor. Yojimbo had agitated earlier on to be able to return to his apartment to get his heavy battle armor. The Mishima heavy armor is impressive. It turns their soldiers into these giant samurai warriors, and it protects them rather well from gunfire. If it has a drawback, and this is true of all corporate heavy armor, it is that the same massive size that makes it so visually intimidating also makes it cumbersome and dangerous in the sort of close-quarters combat we would be facing. While all of us would have loved that level of protection, we opted for something more reasonable. Head to toe, we dressed in ballistic nylon. It would stop most small arms fire, though it would leave nasty bruises behind. Over that, we put on light composite backplates and breastplates that were articulated enough to allow us flexibility while they covered us from groin to throat on both sides. Side panels snugged uncomfortably up into our armpits, but a bullet in there would be given free access to lungs and heart, so the discomfort could be managed. Our combat boots were likewise armored and included knee pads for protecting kneecaps. Armored gloves, composite helmets, and faceplates completed our protective gear and would stop the vast majority of what we were likely to meet down there. Ash, of course, wore no armor at all. He dressed in a black t-shirt and black fatigues. He looked more suited to a nightclub than he did to any attack. With him, the lack of armor did not really matter because of the armor he already wore beneath his plastic flesh. While there was armor made for Attila units, smuggling it into Hexargus would have been difficult and would have only made him that much bigger. Radios linked us all with each other and Beach. He was to remain in Hexargus with the Whiz Kid, directing things from there and providing the kid protection. He also had an external link with some Chasseur and Corsair teams on the outside who were protecting our escape routes. I knew he would have preferred to be in the thick of things, but I welcomed having a cooler head directing our assault and in position to offer immediate help. Lane and Faye carried some simple explosives in case we needed to open up the cell in which they were keeping Lorraine. Pam had a medical kit and had been designated as the primary caregiver to Lorraine, while Klaus had been given a rucksack that contained a ballistic armor jumpsuit for Lorraine. The rest of us were just along to get to Lorraine and to help Pam get out with her. Loaded up and ready to roll, we stole from the Hexargus offices, and Beach contacted me by radio. Video feeds to elevators are negative and null, Ace. Roger, base. I waved the rest of the team forward. We're clear to the elevators. The kid has them blanked. Cautiously, we worked our way down the corridor to the elevators. We kept our team's backs to the wall and covered doors as we went past them. Yojimbo, Pam, and Lane, radio call signs Deuce, Trey, and Cat respectively, covered the north wall, while Klaus, Faye, and Ash followed me. Klaus and Faye answered to Sync and Cease on the radio, and the kid became Keys, while Ash was just Ash. After all, he didn't have an identity to protect in the real world, while the rest of us did. Yojimbo reached the elevator first and summoned it. Lane and I checked it for passengers, then ushered the rest of the team into it. We let Ash stand in front of the doors as he'd soak up any fire from an ambush. I hit the door close button, then held down the down button. With it depressed, I hit 2 and then 1 for a total of 3, and that sent the elevator down 3 levels. Our elevator opened on the side of the central column, facing away from the security center. As we came around with guns drawn, 3 of the 4 technicians in the brightly lit center raised their hands. The 4th raised only 1, and extended a single finger in an ancient sign of defiance, then turned and hit an alarm button on the wall behind him. Cover, everyone. Ash, blow the center. The Attila brought his gun up, and the grenade launcher married to the underside of the barrel vomited out a rifle grenade. It hit the bulletproof glass between us and the security center, and punched through. Even so, the resistance it met going in triggered the grenade's charge. In an instant, the center became a roiling ball of flame, most of which blew the glass back out into the corridor. One whole sheet of it came out of its fittings and flew at Ash, as if it were a sheet of water. It wrapped him in an elastic cocoon, then it shattered, instantly becoming a lethal silicon mist that would have reduced a man to raw bloody meat as it swirled around him. The Attila weathered it without complaint, even though it left his synthetic flesh and clothing hanging in tatters from his ferro-titanium body. Hunkered down behind the elevator column, The glass typhoon missed our humans, but enough smoke filled the core to cut visibility. Staying low, our team moved out, and I keyed the radio. Base, 4 were in the center. They're gone. Alarm went out. Roger, Ice. Alarm is in process of being squelched. We need a lock on 2 guards. Key confirms your targets in SW-105. Guard searching. Roger, moving to SW-105. As I looked up the core, the computer flashed up the corridor designations. I pointed off to the southwest passage. Yojimbo and Klaus headed off down it, with Faye and Lane following closely behind. Pam and I brought up the rear, with Ash stalking down the center of the corridor between us. I almost ordered him to one side or the other, but stopped when I realized that he'd attract the most attention for any enemies, and that would mean that those of us who could bleed would not be the initial targets. Ice, go base. Negative scan on your guards. Key is in the security net 5 and has no visual in southwest, west, or south corridors. Roger base. Team, eyes open because we're alone right now. SW-105 was a suite of rooms at the juncture of the south, west, and southwest corridors. We headed for it with all due dispatch. I assumed any resistance would crop up at the suite, but we all played it carefully. Our pace slowed as we entered the last third of the southwest corridor. With hand signals, I designated myself and Yojimbo as the first 2 attackers, with Klaus and Faye to follow. Ice, go base. Key says something odd is happening down there. What's in your 6? I turned and looked back down the corridor. Behind us, the walls were shifting and twisting to cut off our retreat. Base, I have wall movement. Someone's building a maze. Can Keys stop it? He's on it. Looks like it's a security program. Working on it. Roger, we're going in. Sprinting forward, slightly ahead of Yojimbo, I dropped the muzzle of my CAW-2K on the lock mechanism of the door to SW-105. My computer shifted over to tactical and gave me a crosshair that showed I was on target. 2 bursts from the gun punched the lock and the knob, and I hit the door at full speed. I caught it with my left shoulder and used the impact to rebound myself to the right. I pushed off with my right foot and side-saddled my way across the desk, just to the right of the doorway. My butt and legs knocked the phone, blotter, and a canister of pens flying, while my right hand came across in a sweeping motion and traced a line of fire across the room's far wall. It tore up plaster and blasted glass from the picture frames along the wall, except in 2 places. In those 2 places stood Imperial guards in full heavy combat armor. I took a load of buckshot from the first one's assault shotgun square in the chest. It slammed me back up against the wall, then unceremoniously dumped me down into the secretary's chair behind the desk. I overbalanced the chair so it flipped over and toppled down across my legs. Breathless and stunned, I could do nothing physically. Yojimbo earned the attention of the second guard, but the Mishima expatriate had executed an elegant assault maneuver that made mine look like the clumsy stumbling of a drunk idiot. As he came in, he executed a shoulder roll to the left that took him out of line with the door and below my line of fire. Coming up, he stitched fire across the belly of his guard, while the man's first shot missed wide and high. Yojimbo's burst of fire had driven his man more toward the center of the room, but the CAW-2K's bullets were too small to core through the heavy composite armor. Klaus appeared in the doorway, crouching low, and thrust his shotgun at the guard. Light flashed through the room as he pulled the trigger. The slug caught the guard right above the navel and smashed an oblong hole through the armor. The guard who had shot me swung his mandible shotgun toward Klaus, but before he could pull the trigger, the wall above his head burst in toward him. 3 slugs from Ash's assault rifle, being aimed in accordance with the visual data I fed the Attila, ripped through the wall and hit the man in the head and shoulders. One shattered his helmet and left the head beneath it in not much better shape. I kicked myself free of the chair and pulled myself upright with the desk's help. I waved Yojimbo and Klaus toward the room's other door. Pam, Lane, and Faye entered the office and followed those 2 through the back room. Ash took up a position in the back room. I heard Pam's voice over the radio. Ace, we have the prize. Good. I managed to cough out. Base, what's with the maze? We have the process stopped. All paths out are blocked west, south, and southwest. Gunfire sounded from outside, and some slugs ricocheted off Asher's chest. He returned fire down the west corridor. Leaving him there, I ran to the back of the room and felt a jolt run through me as Pam and Faye zipped Sandy into her body armor. She was exactly what I thought she'd be, except conscious and laughing as in the start of the dream. Slender and slightly on the small side, with her hair cut shorter than I remembered. Her face had lines at the corners of her eyes and mouth. Yet sleeping, they were barely noticeable. Those lines and a few wisps of white in her hair marked the harshness of her life since I'd known her. But the Sandy I knew would have toughed it out through anything. Sandy? Where the hell did I come up with Sandy? Yojimbo looked at me. What is it? Nothing significant. We're taking fire from the southwest corridor. You guys will go out the south corridor, then work your way back to the elevators along the southeast corridor. Ash and I will play rear guard so you can get Sandy out of here. Pam's head came up. Sandy? Lane looked at me as if I'd suddenly sprouted nephrite spikes. This is Lorraine, isn't it? I mean, she's the one we rescued before. Yes, she is. I frowned at him. Look, just get her ready to go. Ash and I will buy you some time. Yojimbo shook his head. We're not leaving without you. Don't worry, we're not suicidal. I winked at him and headed back out into the antechamber. It's just you're all a heretic or two ahead of me from the last time you rescued her. I just want to even the score. See you topside. Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 15, End.